Welcome. Right this way. Enjoy the film.
Yo, what is up, guys? Welcome back to another video. Welcome to the Luigi's Mansion Beta 64 Revisited 1 hour special this time. Now, this was actually made like last year, I'm pretty sure. Like 20, yeah. No, I was always November 10th. I was being like October or something. Anyways, yeah. Luigi's Mansion Beta 64 Revisited. Really cool. So, let's get right into it, guys. Yeah, the reaction video. We did the first Luigi's Mansion Beta reaction video on Monday. Yeah, Monday. And we did his first beta video on it, and it was really cool. It was really cool. So yeah. Anyways, here we go. We got the revisited and more better than ever one. So yeah, started right here.
Luigi's Mansion is one of those rare Nintendo games that no one seems to know about.
I can't believe I actually said that. Oh, hello there, fellow spook lovers, to a very special episode of Beta 64, where I bring a video back from the dead, specifically my first ever video on Luigi's Mansion. Back then, we didn't really have a clear picture on the development of the game, and we especially didn't have a lot of ways to view the files for these cool, unused findings. But those days are in the past. All those days of rumors of death, hanging, and a T for teen rating. We have science now to disprove them.
Science.
And a lot of early footage, and tons of smart people have been able to reverse engineer a lot of the game. And they found some things. ELH, the twisting elemental ghost that would have attacked Luigi.
What?
A completely kind of functional multiplayer mode featuring Luigi and a second player model of Mario. So, let's sit back, grab a box of cheese nips.
Cheese nips.
Look at the
Heck are
complete
those?
developmental history of Luigi's Mansion.
he pulled out
Our
Kit
story
Kat. What?
begins in late 1999, back when the Nintendo 64 disc drive had just recently released in Japan. And Nintendo EAD, who went and developed several disc drive titles, decided that they wanted to create a new game. A game that would end up being Luigi's Mansion. But at this point, it was simply the brainstorming stage of the project, and even though the game was beginning its creation in the era of the Nintendo 64, it wasn't exactly planned to be on the N64 per se. More like whatever console could support it once it started its development. And as time went on, it would become apparent that the N64 couldn't handle what they really wanted to do. So it was only natural to start development on Nintendo's brand new, yet to be revealed console, Project Dolphin, later called the GameCube. But I'm sure you're all curious,
Project
what
Dolphin.
ideas did the team come up with during this brainstorming stage that led them to develop on the GameCube?
Who knows?
Let's start at the very beginning, back when the game wasn't about Luigi, or Mario, or anything like it was going to become. Back then, according to the game's director, it was much more like the dungeon exploration segments in The Legend of Zelda.
What?
More specifically, it was an exploration-based game set in a huge apartment complex. But that didn't
Yo,
last long,
Luigi's
as
Mansion
they
3
eventually moved
confirmed.
from an apartment complex to a Japanese-style ninja house. And eventually,
What?
that ninja house was also changed and morphed into what the team called a European/American-style mansion dollhouse, with Mario
What
as
is
the main
this?
character. Alongside this mansion idea, there was also some other tests going on with the idea of desert levels that Mario could explore. But they
Dang.
just kept going back to that idea of exploring a dollhouse. It just felt so natural. Because in real life, when you look into a dollhouse, you do it through imaginary fourth wall, much like in Luigi's Mansion. So they decided to scrap the desert and move forward with this mansion idea, deciding pretty early on that it would have 3 floors and a basement to explore, all in a cool Western style. According to the director of Luigi's Mansion, there was also a plan to add in a sort of, as he put it, RPG system into the game, where completing certain actions would cause the room to change, kind of like how pressing the button in the storage room moves the wall, but this would have been a lot more prevalent. But around that same time, they had the idea to include a vacuum in the game, and it eventually made it as the player's go-to tool for affecting the world. Of course, at
Who
this
put
point
on
in
my
development,
candles?
they needed more than just ideas, they needed a prototype, and the team got to work making a mansion that you could actually explore. While designing this, they also wanted to try out some different styles of lighting, just to see what would fit best in this
Dark
indoor
lighting's the
space.
best.
And during this experimenting, someone decided to try turning down those lights real low,
Yep.
causing the place to be filled with darkness, deep shadows. And at that moment, right there, was when they decided to make the place haunted.
But of course, Mario wouldn't be a good fit for a haunted house. He's a hero. He's a brave boy. They wanted a main character who would be spooked, silly, and Mario just didn't fit the bill. They needed a character that wouldn't mind being a little cowardly, and that someone was Luigi. And fun fact, despite the fact that they wanted the protagonist to be scared silly, they actually had 0 plans to spook the player.
What?
Tell that to little Andrew, who had nightmares about the Luigi's Mansion ghosts.
Now, as I said before, experimentation with lighting is basically what led the team to go for that spooky atmosphere. But it's also the reason they decided to skip out on the Nintendo 64 and develop for the GameCube. Turns out, as you would probably expect, getting that kind of dark, shadowy atmosphere complete with full dynamic lighting and crisp shadows would be a bit of a challenge to accomplish on the N64. So they decided to turn their attention
on
to
Nintendo
Golf.
64,
And since it
a little
was being
challenging.
developed alongside Luigi's Mansion, they could also make quite a few requests for the system, like having the graphics chip handle real-time shadows and how they interact with the environment. And the Dolphin team was more than happy to include that with the system, along with many other requests like with the GameCube controller itself. At that early time in development, the controller hadn't even been designed yet, so Luigi's Mansion team asked for a few things, like having 2 analog sticks. Turns out they wanted to have this kind of control scheme from the beginning, specifically having one stick for movement and the other for directional control, which turned out to be for Luigi's flashlight and vacuum later on. Because of the more complex controls on the sticks, after all, dual stick controls wasn't exactly a mainstream concept for consoles at the time, the team decided to lay off on the buttons. They didn't want to confuse the players too much. But once the controllers started being formed with all those glorious X and Y and Z buttons, they decided to map them to the Game Boy Horror, and in the end ended up using every single button on the controller. But there was definitely some deliberation on what buttons did what, like the A button for instance. The team noticed that it would be difficult for the player to use the A button while using the C stick, which, I mean, normally wouldn't be that big of a problem, but originally, the sticks were flipped in Luigi's Mansion. You would use the C stick in this build to move around and the control stick for direction, which makes reaching the A button a lot more difficult. So they decided to have the vacuum control with the R button instead of A, with A ending up being the Mario and the
Mario
button. Now, I remember some people playing the game back then thinking, what was the point of having Luigi call out Mario? Why have a whole button dedicated to something that doesn't even have a purpose? Well, there actually was a reason for it, and it wasn't just, let's use all the buttons on the controller. It was added in after a staff member suggested it could be used to reinforce the idea that Luigi is looking for Mario. I mean, besides some minor dialogue throughout the game after the intro, Luigi's goal of rescuing Mario isn't really mentioned all that much. So they decided to have Luigi scream out when pressing the A button, just to remind the player what they're doing in this horrifyingly spooky mansion. You can tell a lot of care went into this game to make it easy to play and understand, but of course, they didn't want it to be too easy. The team wanted to strike this balance, making the game more of a short, replayable experience focusing on exploration rather than item collecting and fetch quests. Though, I mean, you do a little bit of that with the fortune teller, but it's more of a back burner kind of thing, and you can easily find the items just from exploring. Except for that random birdhouse where Mario's letter is. How was I even supposed to know that was there? Why would the letter be in the birdhouse? Still, even then, the team was smart and they put these flying fish ghosts around it so that way when you inevitably decide, I want to suck them up, the vacuum will shake the birdhouse
what?
Look at this, look.
and cause the letter to fly out without the player really having to even think about it. But it still gives them the feeling that they found it themselves. That is good game design. You know what else they were smart about? Adding 2 different control schemes. See, the team had a lot of discussion about this dual-stick gameplay that director Kono wanted, with the team even creating several prototypes with different control schemes just to try them all out, like one that used just 1 stick instead of 2. But Kono was adamant about wanting these dual-stick controls, even if it would make the game more challenging for beginners. In fact, that's one of the reasons why the final game isn't particularly difficult, because the controls themselves were designed to add a layer of challenge to it. But in the end, Kono caved, and the team decided to add a standard control scheme option to the game instead of just the original, intended, sidestep controls. But even if 0 people on the face of this planet use sidestep controls, that dual-stick control scheme actually helped design the GameCube controller itself. Many of the testers who played using that control scheme found it uncomfortable to use with the small C stick, since, remember, at that point, you used it for Luigi's movement, meaning you're on that C stick the entirety of the game. So with that feedback in mind, they decided to make the controller's C stick a bit larger, which, I mean, it's hard to imagine this being any smaller. But some prototype versions of the controller have appeared over the years, and yeah, it does look like it had a smaller C stick and a huge control stick. Also, that Z button is giving me anxiety, so let's move on.
Because the Luigi's Mansion team pretty much had their every wish fulfilled on the GameCube, they really could focus on making the game something truly unique. So, they went all out. I'm talking real-time shadows on every object. I'm talking realistic environmental effects like water, fire, ice, and I'm talking dust. I'm talking realistic dust here. Have you seen the dust in Luigi's Mansion? It responds like accurately to activity in the room, and that's because it took 6 months to program the dust in this game. I know.
What?
It's dedication.
6
And here's the thing,
months?
the reason
Just for
I
some
called you
dust?
here is
Wow.
this debug counter right
Dang.
there. That is the dust counter. When you suck, it actually increases the counter, but it's not just a constant increase. It's actually dependent on how much dust is in the room. So it stops counting, but if I release more dust, it'll start counting again. Now that's good programming.
Now with that freedom of creativity, they really had the ability to experiment with things in this game. While that one programmer was working on his dust for 6 months, Kono decided to try something else out. Glasses-free 3D. Basically what the 3DS has, but for
Wait,
home
3D
consoles.
on GameCube?
Kono recalls setting up his dev kit with a secondary 3D display to try out this technology with
What?
Luigi's Mansion. However, because of the low resolution of the
Bro,
GameCube
what?
and the high cost of a 3D panel at the time, it just wasn't worth implementing. But he had hoped in the future that the technology would advance far enough to make it worthwhile. And it did, Kono. It did. Even if you never worked on Luigi's Mansion again, the dream of Luigi's Mansion 1 becoming 3D finally became a reality in 2018. I'm talking like he's dead. He's fine. He's actually helped produce the 3DS himself, and so he technically turned his own wish into reality. Good for you, man. Now at this point, everything that we've talked about here has been going on behind the scenes. The public had no idea what was going on with Luigi's Mansion at the time. In fact, the first time that we ever got to see the game was at Space World 2000 during the Nintendo Sizzle Reel.
Bro, what is Space World though?
It's
What is that?
sizzling hot. We had a ton of new GameCube reveals like Pokemon, Wave Race, Zelda, Perfect Dark, Metroid. So good. And of course, we also had Luigi's Mansion, which despite just being some cutscenes, was actually running on GameCube hardware when they recorded it, to show the power of the system. And it turns out this short sizzle reel isn't the only place we get to see these scenes. A couple of them even made it into the final game, believe it or not. Like this quick clip of Ghost playing cards. It's kind of hard to see, but thankfully a site known as GamerWeb uploaded a higher quality image of it. Oh, that's much better. Turns out you can find this exact scene on the Ghost Portrificationizer. Right there. See?
Oh
It's not a
yeah, it looks
perfect
way
match,
different though.
Is there anything else here that might look more like... Wait, hold on, go back. That's it. The texture on the Ghost Portrificationizer is literally the exact same texture as this TV. But that's not the only thing from the teaser that snuck its way into the final game. To show you, let's press pause. And going to the final game, let's press pause literally. Look familiar? Yeah, the final game uses a filtered screenshot of this screen from the Space World 2000 teaser. They just couldn't let the scene go.
Nice. That's good
All the lighting
thinking.
and effects are just beautiful. There was more than just this teaser shown off at Space World though. Some other various clips were sent to the press during the show, this time with actual audio of Luigi going and not to mention
Ugh, that scream
sadly, all
creeps
this
me
is
out,
still
dude.
pre-rendered stuff. There was no gameplay shown at Space World 2000, so we can't see these crazy ghost designs in action. Well, that's not entirely true actually. There's one more place where these ghosts were shown, and that's when Miyamoto was demonstrating the GameCube's controller. The presentation starts with the foyer from the teaser, and then focuses on this GameCube on the table. At this point, it switches to gameplay with Miyamoto controlling the ghost on screen with his controller. He can squish it, rotate it, make it throw things, and burp. And he can make the ghost laugh too, so you can hear an early version of what the ghost would have sounded like. I'm not gonna lie, it sounds more like the seagull from Sunshine than a ghost, but hey, you know, this was just the first design for the spooky spirit. The next time we would see them is at E3 2001. So why don't we move forward a few months and check that out?
Now, it turns out there were two different builds that were shown off in the E3 trailer. The first was obviously the E3 build, but the second was something called the Nintendo Difference build, because it was first shown off in an ad campaign showing off the Nintendo Difference. You can tell it's that build because it lacks the coin counter, unlike the playable demo on the show floor at E3. Not all of this was included though. These strange scare sequences with this weird border weren't included, and honestly I can't tell if it was part of the game or just a clever video editing trick. But, I mean, it probably was part of the game, because why on earth would you try to edit a border underneath UI?
Yeah,
Just
true.
Seems a little much for a video editor to do. Anyway, why don't we start our E3 journey by looking at first the E3 2001 trailer.
Now, I didn't accidentally re-show part of the Space World 2000 teaser. This footage was actually still being used for promotional purposes, even at E3. But don't worry, that's only for the beginning of the trailer. After this short refresher, it switches over to the first ever seen gameplay of Luigi's Mansion. And if you add in the footage taken from the show floor's playable demo, there's quite a bit of footage to look through, and of course, there's a lot of changes. As always,
Dang,
the
I'd
Beta Compare
say.
Club took great care searching every inch of the footage. And if you want to check out all of their findings, both big and small, head over to the link below.
Egad.
But as for this
Woohoo.
video, we're going to be looking at some of the biggest, most
Wahoo.
fascinatingly spooky
You guys like
changes
my
that were
Mario
in the
impression?
E3
Pretty sick,
2001
right?
build. First off, the gameplay, which at this point doesn't even mention the whole point of Luigi being here is to rescue Mario. Instead, it's just like, hey, why not have fun exploring this mansion within the time limit?
Bet.
A very demo thing for them to do. In this build, the player had until 1:30 a.m. to explore the dark hallways of this spooky building, after which Egad would call Luigi and say something that we don't know because the text box is too bright and bloomed out on the footage. Oh well. After that, the player is simply kicked out to the title screen and then the demo's over, ready for the next person in line. But Andrew, what about, dare I say it, Zombie Luigi, the one from the original Game Over sequence? No,
Hate that
actually,
face.
it wasn't. That
Fat
infamous
and
creepypasta-inducing
bloody and
scene
scary.
wasn't in this build of the game
Ghostly
or
and
any build of the
paranormal.
game for that matter. It was only in the E3 trailer, so it wasn't a game over screen. It had nothing to do with the storyline. None of that. Mario didn't disappear causing Luigi to get depressed. It was simply a trailer to entice people to play the game. That's all. Now there are some more gameplay elements in the game that were scrapped, and not just because it was only for a demo. These were all planned to be in the final game, but were scrapped for one reason or another. Like the Poltergust, whose design itself changed between E3 and release, as did the nozzle, which is bigger in this early build, and the hose attached to it, whenever it sucks up a ghost, we get this big bulbous blob thing running through it to show
Bulbous
that you
blob.
successfully captured a specter. Along with all of this, the flashlight was also bigger in this build, and
Oh,
fun
yeah.
fact, it's different in another way too. It can't turn off, and it wasn't even planned to until the end of development, when Miyamoto requested that the player have more control over Luigi's actions, and thusly use more buttons on the controller. So the idea they came up with was to make a new flashlight, one that could be turned off with the B button, letting ghosts get closer and effectively allowing the player to be more strategic on how they handle their ghost capturing. Going back to E3, there's one more thing the Poltergust used to do. Explode. As you vacuum, this meter on the bottom of the screen would build up and then BAM! It exploded engulfed in flames. This, of course, was scrapped before release, but the meter down there was eventually repurposed as the fire, water, and ice meter, with the number being replaced with icons for each depending on what you have. It's funny though, in this build that Miyamoto plays on stage, which by the way is special with Cheese because he's a cheater, he can use the water element, complete with its own unique nozzle that was scrapped. But the meter on the bottom? Yeah, it's not there. It doesn't appear at all. So basically the overheat meter literally flipped purposes, nowadays limiting the elements and making the vacuum unlimited instead of the other way around. Speaking of the HUD, there's some more changes here too, like the coin counter, which was designed to count all these early coins spilling out all of the floor and rotating about. But even if they were scrapped, both the coins and counter are still in the final game, the coins being out of bounds with no functionality other than its spinning animation, and the counter's code was recently discovered by YouTuber Grumpy Sergal, though sadly
What?
the counter is considered a lost cause since so much of the code was written over when it was assembled for release. A Luigi's Mansion modder who goes by the name of LM Finish managed to rework the finals money counter to look like the E3 build, but technically that's still not the original code, it's a mod. Next up is the heart counter, which despite it obviously being capped at 100, has a label there to spell it out for the player. But it turns out, in this build, there technically are points where it isn't capped at 100, all thanks to these guys, known by fans of the game as bashers. Here they serve kind of the same function as the bowling ghost in the final game, a small, easy to suck up ghost that
The
appears
hash
exclusively in the
slinging
hallways.
slasher.
Actually, in even earlier builds of the game, like the Nintendo Difference build, they were seen in the bedroom, and were also in the
Bedroom,
hallway.
huh?
In the E3 build, though, they were only seen in the hallway and always purple, with their only form of attack being sneaking up on Luigi while he's invisible, and then spooking the boy. This would cause the poor boy's max health to drop to 50 and him scurrying away. After standing up,
Kinda like that,
luckily it increases back to 100,
animation.
but the health points still remain at 50, or at least it would if Miyamoto turned off his game genie. So at worst, it takes away half your health, and theoretically at best, it doesn't hurt you at all as long as your health was already below 50. Technically though, the Nintendo Difference build is different here too. Their bashers only took 30 health points, and Luigi didn't fall on the ground and crawl away, he was just normally spooked. Either way though, this seems really unfair for Luigi. I mean, after all, you can't even see the guy until he's right up on you. Well, except for that little, what is that, dust? Spectre juice? I don't know. That's where the Game Boy Horror came in handy, though people didn't know that was what it was called back then because it was lower on the screen. See that little light on top? That was to let you know that a ghost was near, and that's how you would be able to tell if a basher was approaching. But it turns out, this radar doesn't only react to bashers, it also goes off for normal ghosts too, which highlights another change. Originally, these quote-unquote normal ghosts could appear in the hallways as well, though in the final game, only special ghosts can, like the bowling ghost I mentioned earlier. Honestly, I'm really glad they only used the Game Boy Horror for detecting boos, because it would have been really annoying to have to hear for basically more than half the game. And by the way, speaking of boos, they make an appearance in this E3 build too, just in a
They
different
do?
way. Originally, they acted the same as flying
Oh, yeah,
fish
they
ghosts,
do.
just floating around
Those are
until they
so much
eventually got
different,
sucked up
though.
by Luigi. Now, I should note that flying fish do appear
Oh
in
my
this build
gosh, look
too,
at
in
those.
the washroom specifically, coming out of the toilet. Or sorry, in this build it's called the laboratory. And actually, technically it shouldn't have any ghosts in it at all, since in the final game you just talk to a toad to turn on the lights. Those flying fish were probably a good reason why the boos changed. After all, they pretty much function the same, except you can cause boos to stop moving when you shine your flashlight on them. Also, now that I think about it, why are boos even in Neville's room? In the final game, books are supposed to be the only annoying thing here, not small flying ghosts. But the person playing this demo was able to get past them, captured Daddy, who only had 50 health points instead of 100, and was rewarded not
Daddy.
with a key and pearls, but with an explosion of coins from an open ghost chest. I mean, it looks slightly transparent, so I guess it's an undead ghost chest. Wait,
I
have I
guess.
talked about controls yet? I mean, I guess I did a little. The control sticks are still flipped in this build and use the
I'm
side
just gonna
stick
see if
control
we are
scheme
recording.
exclusively.
Because if you're not
To
recording,
mention, the Z button
we
is
are recording. Okay,
completely
good.
removed from the final game.
I was gonna say, if you're not recording,
Yeah, Luigi could originally
that
squat
will
down
not
in
be
order to dodge
pleasant
attacks, but
for
no
your
one
boy.
at the show really knew you could squat, so thankfully we got lucky and someone just pressed it by accident.
Now what about... Ow! Music! Jeez Louise. Well, this demo has a very strange song list that includes a very weird rendition of the Luigi's Mansion theme. It's not orchestral at all, it's all synthesized, so take a listen.
so creepy, dude. Bum 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 dun 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 bum 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 bum. Dude, I love the Luigi's Mansion soundtrack and Dark Moon soundtrack. I mean, Luigi's Mansion 3 soundtrack, I mean, it's decent, but it's not the best one ever, if I'm being honest with you guys. Bum, 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 bum.
Turns out that's not the only rendition of this theme. There's also a special track that plays when Luigi clears a room that uses bells instead of Luigi's whistling. And it turns out a user by the name of Effie managed to recreate the track using sounds from the final game, because it turns out the instruments that were used in this version of the theme are still in the final game.
Bet. What? That's the creepiest room clear tune that I've ever heard in my life. It sounds like that there's just gonna be a doll standing right by, or maybe just sitting in a chair, rocking chair right behind you. Like, oh my god. Jeez.
And last but not least, we have Egad's Lab, which is completely different from the final game. And sadly, we don't have a high quality rip, and we don't have a high quality recreation, so we just have this medium noise reduced quality that was made by yours truly. Take a listen.
Sounds like Splatoon music. Is that just me? Or does that sound kind of like Splatoon music? Probably just me, though.
Now that we've went through all these major gameplay changes, why don't we check to see how the story changed? And yes, it did actually change a bit from
It
E3.
did?
First off, at the demo's title screen, there were a couple of options that allowed you to either skip the intro or play from the beginning. So instead of skipping this time, let's see what the intro has to offer us. Okay, right off the bat, the intro cutscene is different.
What?
Starting with the different angle in the trees, and then it kind of sort of looks a bit like the finals returning to the mansion scene. But it definitely looks nothing like the finals intro with Luigi looking at the map. Notably, Egad's lab isn't here, and there's a reason for that, which we'll learn once Luigi enters the mansion. Here, you'll notice he's holding the flashlight with both hands instead of one, which can actually be replicated in the final game by messing with a parameter in RAM. Apparently, Luigi has 8 holding methods in the final game, the first being the two-handed one from E3, and the last one being used in the final game. Now let's take Luigi upstairs, have him interact with the door, and once that flag's been set, head back downstairs to see a different colored ghost ready to spook Luigi with his spooky key. Except Luigi isn't scared, like at all. He's just kind of standing there, unlike the final game. Oh, and as you've probably already noticed by now, all of the ghosts, not just the one in this intro, are all different colors compared to their final counterparts. And the reason for that is because originally, any ghost could be any color. There weren't these specific colors for specific ghosts like it is in the final game. There were body types, and then there were colors, and they could all be mixed and matched at will, depending on what the developers felt like that day. Oh, the ghost left, and now Luigi's got the key. No cinematic, but hey, you know, it's fine. Now we can check out what's beyond that door, and it turns out, it's a spooky boy. Ah, says Luigi, unlike the final game where he just screams. Ugh, says the spooky boy in return. Both of these were cut out from the final game, as well as when the 3 ghosts at the end say, boo, when Luigi and Egad run away. I'm sorry, in this build he's called Dr. Elvin Gad.
What? No, not Elvin Gad. Do Egad. Egad's the best, and Egad will always be the best.
Luigi here, saying that he's intruding on his house. Since apparently in this version of the game, he's been living inside the mansion for quite some time, thinking it was vacant, and being a ghost researcher, it was perfect for his studies. Perhaps this is the reason why the lab wasn't outside. He's been living inside the mansion after all, so maybe, just maybe, in this build, his lab is also somewhere below the mansion. It'd be a very interesting idea, but of course, that's all speculation. I wish Egad would have told us where it was at, but instead he continues his talk about the mansion and mentions that it's actually famous for being haunted, which contradicts the final storyline where the mansion is simply an illusion that just appeared one day. But no, here in this build, it's a tourist destination lived in by an old man. Still, sounds pretty spooky to me.
Pretty spooky, if you ask me.
Luigi returns to the mansion, and we're back where we would have been if we had just simply skipped the intro. But now that we have full range of the mansion, since no one bothered to lock any doors, well, except for 2 doors. The main door in the foyer, whose keys you get from Chauncey's room, and the upstairs hallway, which can be unlocked with a key from the living room. Other than that, though, everything else is unlocked. Let's see what rooms have changed. The bedroom is a good place to start, featuring a different layout with 2 beds instead of 1 double bed. And hey, there's Lydia. In the final game, you have to pull back a curtain to create a breeze and cause her to move, but in this build, a bed is in the way, so that's not gonna happen. Here we just sit and wait for her to turn, and bam, the battle begins.
It's so much easier, because it took me, I remember the first time I was playing Luigi's Mansion, like I had so much trouble trying to find out how to make the ghost appear. And like at least like after an hour, I finally figured out that I have to open the window to let the wind come in.
Guess we'll move on to the bathroom.
Fun little childhood story from yours truly.
Gag was met with lots of laughs when it was shown off to the press, as you can imagine. In this build, though, when you pull back the curtain, Petunia isn't there waiting for you. Instead, there's nothing. What about the old dining room? What does it have to offer? A lot, actually. First off, this door was replaced with a cabinet later on that I used to hide behind because I was too scared fighting Mr. Lugs because those gosh dang fireballs are freaking scary. Also, that fire was apparently originally a grandfather clock, whose face texture was later used as part of the portrificationizer. Good to see it being put to good use. What else? What else? Well, there are chairs on both sides of the table in this build, and there are red flames on the candle instead of purple, and Mr. Lugs is nowhere to be seen. Since he's not here, there's no waiter ghosts, and in their place are feisty normal ones. And he's going to die. Yep, and he died. Oh, okay, all right.
Good night. Oh my God, it's good night. Oh, geez, that's creepy.
Probably a good thing. I'm starting to get all jumpy from all those spooky E3 changes. Honestly, I feel like something out there's like watching me.
Same. And my lights are off too, so does not help the cause.
Rumor that just needs to finally be put to rest.
All right.
What?
This is the Safari Ghost. Or should I say, a DeviantArt drawing of the Safari Ghost by the Nabil20091. Now, who is this diabolic dashing spirit? Well, it all stems from Nintendo Power issue 149, where this image of an early Safari room is shown along with the message, when your goal-busted mission takes you to the trophy room, proceed with caution. If you meet up with the ghost of a hunter, he'll want to add Luigi to his collection.
Okay, that's kind of creepy though. I ain't gonna lie. But anyway, guys, the video is indeed over. Part 2 is indeed coming out tonight. Probably like right after this video is gonna be uploaded. So you had 2 uploads in one day. Wow, pretty sick. Yeah, but the second video, will be just me reacting to the rest of the video, part 2, because I mean, it'd be a bit to upload that to my channel. It's a little long to upload that, so that will be a bit before I upload that. But anyways, guys, I thank you all for watching. Do indeed leave a like and subscribe, and do watch part 2, because part 2 is gonna be pretty sick. So yeah, I'll see you guys soon in the next episode. Peace.